First, Michael Gove unveiled his much-awaited new definition of extremism today, with groups and individuals covered by the definition set to be denied taxpayer funding and prevented from meeting ministers and officials. But crucially, the changes won't become law, and officials will get no new powers to enforce them, meaning that any banned groups will still be able to meet and hold demonstrations. Indeed, even Rishi Sunak struggled to defend the definition earlier today.
There won't be any statutory powers, and the police won't use it, so what's the point?
As I said at the steps of Downing Street a few weeks ago, there has been a rise in extremist activity that is stirring division, undermining our values and liberal parliamentary democracy. That's not right, and it's important that government has the tools that it needs to protect us against that. That's what the strategy will outline.
Joined now by GB News presenter Nigel Farage. Nigel, is this definition absolutely pointless?
In one way, yes, because the law is the law. And what the police ought to do is enforce the law. And part of the anger of many of us is they're simply not doing that. And when they do, they misapply it. However, the intention of this is to get out of public life people deemed to be extremists. Those that make that decision, civil servants. And you know what? Having read it, point two about those that undermine, the functioning of our liberal democracy. Well, 25 years ago, when I was first elected to the European Parliament, on a ticket of leaving the European Union, I was literally met officially from the Foreign Office, who thought I was something akin to a terrorist. Had this definition been in place then, I very much doubt the Electoral Commission would have allowed me to stand as a candidate. And the third point of his definition is effectively those that act as a gateway to extremism. So let's say on your show, Patrick, you debate illegal immigration and you have some very strong views. Someone says, look, those crossing the channel are illegals. Many of them could be criminals. And then somebody, out on the genuine extreme, then does something beastly. Well, you could have been a gateway to that. You could be an extremist. You could be banned from being a broadcaster. So it's all about interpretation. And the worry is, this is now open to abuse, and the Tories have been terrible on the rise of woke. But once Labour get in, goodness gracious me, we could all be banned.
Yeah, and Rishi Sunak thought the problem with extremism in this country was so severe that he had to get the lectern out and stand outside Downing Street and tell us all that he was going to be drawing up a framework. And the response is to say, right, here's some people, and the government's not going to give them any money, but they can still do that thing every single Saturday or outside Parliament that I thought was so bad that I had to come and make a statement about it. I mean, do you think that's just weak?
I think they're not sure what to do because, had the definition been seen to be aiming at Islamists, they would have been accused of prejudice and cover. So they've done it. So Gove said the new definition will be less woolly. No, the new definition can be interpreted how the government and civil service of the day choose to interpret it. I'd like to see the whole thing scrapped. Let's go back to the law.
As you said there is the possibility that this will be open to abuse going forward. It was all very well and good Michael Gove coming out today and saying, some people who hold, basically conservative values or conservative religious values, etc. I think really he was alluding to like pro-lifers, for example, when he was saying that. Well, they're not going to be. But that's now. That's now. Right? What happens in a few years' time?
Hope Not Hate have produced their State of Hate report today, 2024. They indirectly, through the Hamlin Trust, get government funding. They're a report. I was mentioned 56 times, but I'm rather proud of that, really. GB News was mentioned 60 times. And people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who are pretty moderate, in my view, in fact, I think quite wet. So I like him a lot, but he's a bit wet sometimes. And he's a dangerous extremist, according to this. Well, given that a Labour peer, is one of the people that runs Hope Not Hate, there is reason to think that what Gove has done is to open the door to genuine free opinions being banned from public life if we were ever to get a genuine hard left Labour government.
Well, look, responding to the announcement, Mend which is one of these groups, said that the new definition was a blatant attack on civil liberties, while the Muslim Association of Britain described it as a blatant effort to stifle dissenting voices. Cage said it would challenge the government's deep dive into authoritarianism. Patriotic Alternative said that it was a dangerous step towards a totalitarian state. So that's where they're all at on it. I think they can all file some kind of judicial review, so no doubt we'll just end up in the courts for however long on it anyway. But the news, Nigel, that Boris Johnson might make a comeback to campaigning for the Tory party in the Red Wall before the next election. Well, it was the talk of northern towns earlier this week, apparently. But new polling has poured cold water on hopes of a Boris election boost. 43% of 2019 Tory voters saying that Johnson would be a liability, not an asset. Nigel, has the Boris bubble burst?
Nonsense, Patrick. This was released by Conservative Central Office on the day that Lee Anderson moved from the Conservatives to Reform. And the Times front page and other media swallowed it hook, line and sinker. Let me tell you why Boris Johnson will not be campaigning in the Red Wall seats. Number one, it would do a favour to Rishi Sunak. Boris never does anything for anybody other than himself. Secondly, it would involve hard work. He's never been very keen on hard work. And frankly, looking at him physically recently, I'm not sure he's even up to it. I mean, he really does look a shambles right at the moment. And thirdly, and most importantly, if he was to walk down the streets of those Red Wall seats that were won by the Conservatives, he would find from many people a deeply hostile reaction. And that's what you get when you betray people's trust. These Red Wall voters, remember, I was the gateway drug. They all came through UKIP and the Brexit Party. They were old Labour family voters, worried about changing their communities, worried about what mass immigration was doing to their local towns and bigger cities. And under Boris, we've hit record levels of legal and illegal immigration. Let me promise you something, this will not happen.
But, Nigel, I put it to you that at least Boris would be out campaigning for the Conservatives. You know, you care about Britain. You and Mr Brexit were hurtling towards a Labour government. Are you not going to be out campaigning? You're not going to be out there campaigning for reform or for whoever else trying to stop a Labour government, Nigel, you know?
Well, I mean, Boris is almost in retirement. What I'm doing is I'm using, within the rules, my position at GB News, with my 4.2 million followers on social media. I'm doing, and particularly on TikTok these days, with a younger audience, I am still fighting, trying very hard to get people to look at things in a very, very different way. I'm still whether I stand for election, whether I stay as I am still campaigning and fighting for change. I'm not sure Boris is doing any of those things.
Well, now time for something completely different, as they say, Nigel, because GB News' political editor, Christopher Hope, has got a new podcast, OK? So it's Chopper's Political Podcast. It premieres tomorrow at 6 a.m. Mark the launch. He caught up with pop star Holly Valance, who, well, I'll take it away, Holly.
Last time I voted Conservatives. Next time I'll be voting Reform.
Really?
Yeah.
You're
Well, I think the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. And I'm sure as hell not going to Labour.
What do you make of that, Nigel? She's
a good friend of mine. All right. So, you know, hands up. I have an interest in this. She's a good friend. She and her husband, Nick, are good friends of mine, very good friends of mine. And I even took them to meet Donald Trump a couple of years ago. So you're not going to get an unbiased view here. Holly cares about current affairs. She's very passionate about many, many issues. And she was, and her husband, Nick, big supporters of Boris, very big. I mean, not just big supporters, but friends, personal friends, you know, with Boris Johnson, with Carrie. And she feels completely let down by what the Conservatives have done since 2019. And yes, she's Holly Valance from Neighbours, and from pop music, from films, and a star. But actually, do you know what? She represents a view that is held by many millions of people in this country. You know, if you betray people, if you lie to people, in the end, you pay a price.